So, me again. I'm actually introducing our lovely speaker today. So I'm pleased to introduce Liz Brittan, who I met through the Nurture Kids project. We provided quite a few boxes to two departments in the Women's and Children's Hospital. Liz is the Manager of Volunteers for Women's and Children's Health Network in South Australia, responsible for the management and strategic development of volunteer support. This involves maintaining and developing innovative and sustainable volunteer programs for both in-hospital and community-based services of the network. Liz has nearly 20 years' experience in coordination and management in the not-for-profit, local government and state government sectors. She is the inaugural member of the Volunteer Strategy of South Australia, who is still involved today. Liz is passionate about raising the profile of volunteer management and the importance of networking and mentoring within the profession. Please welcome Liz Brittan.
Thank you so much, Jo. Jason's told me to speak up loud, get close to the microphone. Thank you for inviting me to be your guest speaker today. I'm extremely honoured to be here. I'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Kaurna land, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. First, I want to congratulate you for choosing Heidi as your president for the last year. I've been fortunate enough to know Heidi for many years in volunteer management circles, on committees and serving on the volunteer strategy for South Australia together. She's a great encourager, a networker, intelligent and strategic, and she's making her mark on the volunteer sector with passion, and I'm very sure she's a huge asset to this club. So it was Heidi who just over a year ago asked me if I'd be interested in partnering with Rotary Adelaide to develop nurture kits for our health workers. So you can see on the slide there a little bit of us making the kits and the recipients of those kits. So our volunteers partnered with you to develop those kits. Your donations, along with the donations from our volunteers, enabled us to put together 70 nurture kits that we gave to staff in the adolescent ward and Boylan ward. Boylan ward is our psych ward, paediatric psychology ward. During COVID, they experienced a particularly tough time, and 2020 saw a huge increase in mental health issues for adolescents and children, such as anxiety, depression, eating disorders rose. Our psych ward overflowed into our adolescent ward, and it was a really tough time for staff, and a group of staff that often don't get acknowledgement because they don't deal with cute babies and children, and so they were so chuffed to get the nurture kits. So much so that one of our staff members saw one of the nurses after her shift carrying this box like it was, a box of diamonds, and she said to her, "Oh, what have you got there?" And so the nurse explained to her that she had this nurture kit that had been given and who had given it and put it together. And Robin said to me, it was like it was the most precious thing to her, and she had tears in her eyes, the fact that they'd been thought of. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, and to just let you know that those things that you do that may seem like small things to you, they really count and they make a difference. So keep up the good work, just fabulous. So, anyway. let's talk about what turns you on. But first maybe I should tell you what turns me on. So, what turns me on is when my staff and I successfully connect members of our community to their dream volunteer role with the Women's and Children's Health Network. When I see volunteers switched on, enjoying their role, feeling like they make a difference, coming into their shift with a smile and leaving with a bigger smile. When I get fabulous feedback from staff about the volunteers contributing in their area. When I see a volunteer's confidence rise and increase. When they win paid employment because of that increased confidence. When they have friendships, make friendships, and are part of a great team. I know you have recently done some work as you've developed your strategic plan, and some of that has been to look at what is the Rotary Adelaide story, who you are as individuals, and what you want out of your experience here and in your volunteer roles. Dare I say, you've looked at what turns you on. So now, I'd like us to take a few minutes. I want to firstly get you to talk to the person to your right and then to your left. And I want you to share with them what turns you on about Rotary, and about the idea of volunteering. So ready, set, and go. How did we go? Did we get our Michael Jackson on? No? So what was it, some of those things? Was it networking and friendships and social connection, making new friends, making a difference, belonging? We all look at that. Those things make us feel really good. Just as a little bit of context, the Women's and Children's Health Network consists of the Women's and Children's Hospital, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, Torrance House, Helen House, Child and Family Health Services, Disability Services, Allied Health and Complex Care Services, and Youth and Women's Safety and Wellbeing Division. So at present, post-COVID, we have around 150 volunteers in most of those areas, but the majority of our volunteers contributed their time, skills and experience at the Women's and Children's Hospital. Last year we did a wellbeing survey around our volunteers. I just want to share some of the, no more music, some of the stats with you. So, as expected, there's 50% of our volunteers are 65 years and over. However, it's our great joy that 20% of our volunteers sit in the 18 to 24-year-old age group. And there's a great smattering of volunteers in that middle section. When you get to 35 to 50 years, people are spending a lot of time volunteering with sport, with families, and so forth, and they're working, earning years. So that usually explains the stats around that, especially when you know that our volunteers contribute Monday to Friday, 8 till 4 p.m. So there's not a lot of opportunity outside of those hours. People come from all sorts of different working backgrounds. Yes, a lot of them are retired. Some of them work part-time, study and work, self-employed, so they're a little bit more flexible. And this is a really important thing for us to understand as I talk further, and this is the reason why I'm talking to you today about what turns you on and what makes you feel good about volunteering, because if you're turned on and feel good, you'll hang around and you'll stay with an organisation. So, we're very proud of the fact that we do have volunteers that do stay for, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 years. Our longest serving volunteers was 44 years. So, absolutely amazing. And then we accommodate our younger volunteers who are only available for a certain amount of time. All good. That's us there. So as an iconic South Australian institution with an explicit built-in message, we are fortunate enough to rarely advertise for our volunteers. It will be easy to become complacent and see the volunteers' value through a cost replacement lens. And although volunteers provide obvious benefit to our organisation, we need to be much more concerned about the social impact, about connection and inclusivity if we want to have a healthy, innovative volunteer programs that reflect our consumer base. Women's and Children's Health Network has procedures and processes in place to manage the risk of volunteer involvement, which includes much rigour around engaging volunteers. This means working with children checks, health screenings, referee checks, online training, face-to-face training. We never apologise for that, as we know that in our care are the most vulnerable of our community: babies, children, young people and women. As important as the process is, the ultimate goal is matching the right volunteer to the right role. To do that, we find out what turns someone on. Why are they here? Why are they choosing Women's and Children's? What do they want to get out of their role? Do they want to use their existing skills, or do they want to learn new ones? Do they like working alone, or do they like working in a team? What did they or didn't they like about a previous volunteer role? We tease out their motivation. So to demonstrate this to you, I want to share some of our volunteer stories with you, because their story makes up our story. So here we have Glynis. Glynis is a Maori woman who coming to live in Australia, has experienced some isolation because of her background, which is really incredible to me. But she has she's the warmest, most engaging person, and so she has a particular way of being able to connect with perhaps our more minority groups. So even though her negative has become a positive. Here we have Helen. So Helen's the one in the cap. Helen is actually a palliative care nurse at Flinders, and she actually volunteers in 2 different roles with us. One here, she's in the holding bay in one of our paediatric theatres, so she assists families to get ready to take their little one into theatre, and then helps them afterwards to show them where little Johnny might be after he's had his tonsils out. So parents are very, very vulnerable at that time, and she's just an expert. She also volunteers as a family support volunteer in our neonatal nurseries, and her nursing experience is exceptional because she understands what the nurses are on about. Here we have 2 of my favourites, Mignon and Jean. So Mignon is in the stripes. Mignon is 91. She trained at the Adelaide Children's Hospital back then as a nurse, but then when she married, of course, back in the day, you were not allowed to work anymore. So she raised her family and came back as a volunteer. She's been with us for about 25 years. She also volunteers, as you can see in the other picture, she's in the Rogerson Theatre holding bay, and she absolutely loves it. She organises everyone up there. She's brilliant. Jean, the other lady in the floral shirt, has been with us for 17 years, and she does administrative roles, making up packs of information for new parents. The interesting thing about Jean, before she came to us, she volunteered for 2 other organisations, and when we asked her why she left, she said she left because things changed. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that, Jean. And she said, well, I understand things change, but it was like they came in the next week to volunteer, and they changed the whole system on them, and they expected them to do something different. And the mistake that was made there was they didn't take the volunteers on the journey with them and involve them. And so what initially turned her on to go and work for that organisation, it was turned off because she wasn't included. So I always remember that. It's such a big clue about retaining volunteers. Karen is an ex-primary school principal who is now a family support volunteer in Rose Ward. Teachers make wonderful volunteers when they're roles that work with our families because they understand the parent-child relationship and what part the other organisation, whether it be a hospital or school, the part that they play in their care. They call them Jack and Jill, so Jackie and Jill. They volunteer as family support volunteers in our neonatal nurseries. They both bring something very, very special to their role. Jill, who's sitting down, had a grandson that was born at 27 weeks gestation. And so she was, you know, the grandma that supported the parents as they had to go through that and be in the neonatal nursery and, you know, helping care for other children outside. So, and Jackie, in the forefront of the photo, her bub was born at 24 weeks. at the Queen Victoria Hospital before the hospital amalgamated. And so she has an amazingly unique perspective to offer parents in the neonatal nurseries, and a good story to tell. Her daughter's at university, thriving, so it's a good news story for her to share with parents that are often at their most bereft, Here's another group of suspects. It's Jazz Jeep that's kneeling down there, the little vehicle there. He's a psych student. Emily at the top there, so they're play therapy volunteers. And Max in the middle, he's a med student, coming to experience what the hospital has, like what is health really? What would a career in a hospital look like? And Bev, who's been with us for about 15 years. That photo was taken in our hospital creche, which is closed at the moment due to COVID. Menika was one, she's not with us anymore because she was so good at her volunteer admin role, they asked her to join the admin casual pool. And so she got a job. Yeah. And Janet, in the floral shirt, she was a chief accountant with a large company, Australia-wide company, and she's come to offer her services as admin support. Every now and then she said, oh, they want me in Perth, I'm going to have to do a little bit of work in Perth, and she flies off for a few weeks, but we're so lucky to have such skilled people. And Natasha, who's mum of young teenagers, she works part-time. She wants to give back to her community. And then we have Ray. Can you see him there in the back of his office? He's been with us 20 years. He's 89 years old. He works up in gastroenterology unit, making up breath testing kits that get sent out to people to do breath tests and whatever, but yeah, he's such an institution there, they've given him his own office. And there you go. If you're a volunteer with the Women's and Children's, you have to learn to dress up. Once you have volunteers on board, you can't just sit back and take advantage of their good nature. We need to keep their switch flicked. We need to keep them turned on. It's an ongoing responsibility of staff to continue to make volunteers feel needed, wanted, thanked, appreciated, special and noticed. This means hearing their voice, getting their feedback and keeping them informed. Meeting the needs and motivations across generations can be very challenging. So we try, for example, to balance the use of technologies and social media with face-to-face phone calls, gift cards, snail mail, to suit the needs of the whole cohort and making valuable connections with them. We want them to keep those warm, fuzzy feelings they had when they first joined us going for 2 or 3 years or even more. Maya Angelou, the American poet and actress, said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." According to research done by behaviour economist Dan Ariely, we make 95% of our decisions based on our emotions versus our intellect. That's huge, isn't it? 95%. Emotion is a much more powerful driver than reason. So what did our volunteers tell us? They told us about the benefits of their volunteering. And I don't have to read them all out, you can probably read most of those for yourself. But, you know, having new experiences, making friends, meeting new people, happiness, I am useful. Who doesn't want to feel those things? Each and every one of us do. My sense of well-being, you know, there's a lot of research, and I really actually encourage you to go out. I decided I would not have time to delve into that here today, but the research around volunteering connection to well-being is quite marked, and it's very, very interesting reading. What motivates them? Being valued to their community. I want to help and care for people. The feeling I get when I know I've made a difference and made life a bit easier for someone. For their own mental health. And you know, that's a really important thing. And I believe it's the community development person in me that loves the idea of being able to assist someone who has suffered mental health issues, to connect with volunteering, regain their confidence, you know, get up in the morning, go somewhere, do something valuable. So those things are really important. Just going to pop that slide on. This is our inaugural guide team when we won the Women's and Children's Health Network Award. So quite a diverse group, and they're just fantastic. Still about half of them there with us today, 5 years later, so that's good. But what happens when you're turned off? You give up, you leave, you go elsewhere. Unlike paid employment, there's not even a paycheck keeping a volunteer. Can one organisation tick all the boxes for every individual? Absolutely not. However, volunteer involving organisations must work hard at developing a culture of retention, seeing volunteers as a valuable resource and not a disposable commodity. It's much better to have a team of happy volunteers that you add to with ongoing recruitment. It's much better to be building a team instead of replacing them. I expect this isn't much different from Rotary Adelaide, retaining its membership. You want your story to be one where long-standing members are attracting a new, diverse membership, and not one where you are scrambling to keep numbers up. Communities are rich and vibrant places when they have organisations where people have a sense of belonging, can feel valued, and where they can give. That is one thing our organisations have in common. I hope I've given you some food for thought today as we continue to discover what flips our switch and turns us on. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Liz, that was amazing. Just looking at all those volunteers was beautiful. So we've got time for 2 questions, I think, a few questions. Anybody question?
Thank you for a great presentation, a wonderful job you do. You gave us a lot of stats. Have you got a cost of what it does to get a volunteer from introduction to actually doing their job? Because this is one of the issues that we find when trying to get volunteers. It's actually, and some organisations spend a very lot of money to get people to meet all the requirements they have to for volunteers, and this is one of the biggest barriers that I've seen to volunteering.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Look, it's not an up-to-date costing. It's probably about 3 years old. I did a costing out, it was about $5,000 per volunteer. So volunteers aren't free. But then, you know, if you want to talk about money, you balance that out, and our volunteers on a normal year, let's not consider the last couple, because not normal, would contribute over 25,000 hours of volunteering worth around $1 million to our organisation. Which is fabulous. It's obviously, as you've probably heard as I speak, that's not the most important thing to me, but it is important, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree with what Jeff said. There's so much wisdom in your presentation. It was very enjoyable to listen to. So relevant to Rotary. I was really interested in your comments about people that leave when things change, and organisations are always having to change.
Yeah.
I was wondering, have you any strategies, because Rotary is an organisation that's looking at change, where we can sort of make sure that we bring people on the journey, which is so important. Have you seen any of that in your own experience, and maybe you can share that with us?
Yeah, I certainly have, and you know, health is quite an evolving environment, and things do change. I think since I've been at the Women's and Children's Health Network, we've had 4 CEOs. Personally, I've had 6 directors. So, you know, and they impact. So I think it behooves staff in a volunteer unit to actually buffer that with volunteers. And you still do the same things about making people feel valued and important, but you keep people informed along the way. We have a volunteer advisory group which represents volunteers from, you know, all sorts of different roles, and through them we feed back information to all the volunteers. It's about communicate, communicate, communicate. You cannot communicate too much more. Even if, and you know, it's sometimes putting a bit of a twist on not such good news, but it's about how what they do is still really valuable and will continue to be valuable. Remind them, like telling the stories about the impact that they make all the time. And as I said, communicate, communicate, communicate. Take people along with you. Listen to the, you know, the not such good stuff, and see what you can do about that as well.
Thank you. That was amazing. Let's come back. One last thing. Please accept this certificate of appreciation. So a donation will be made on your behalf for Rotary Adelaide Community Services and Youth Projects.
Beautiful.
Please, let's thank you.